I thought I was too good for my werewolf cop husband. Dear Scary Stories NYC, being married to a werewolf police officer is certainly not something I ever imagined for myself. But here we are, 5 years into our marriage, and I can honestly say that it has been one hell of a ride. First of all, I never believed in cryptids ever in my life. I didn't believe in Bigfoot, Nessie, aliens, and I most certainly didn't believe in werewolves. I mean, come on. Additionally, there was a time when I was very anti-cop. I was all about defunding the police years before it became a popular mantra. I could never have imagined that I would be married to a cop in the future. But I really didn't understand what cops did, to be honest. I just thought they were a bunch of fascist bullies telling the rest of us how to live our lives. But then I personally experienced crime firsthand, and that sobered up my perspective quite drastically. I'll never forget the night I was confronted by a quartet of knife-wielding muggers. I was walking home from work when they jumped out from an alley and demanded my purse. Terrified, I handed it over, thinking that they would then leave me alone. Instead, this seemed to send them on a power trip, and they started to get even more aggressive, shoving me around. Suddenly, from out of the darkness, there's no other way to put it, but a werewolf in police uniform appeared. I mean that literally. There was a dog-headed man in a full police uniform, which is something you don't see every day. Actually, I do see it every day, but most people don't. The muggers turned to face the handsome and brave werewolf, but he was too quick for them. In just a matter of seconds, he had taken down all four, leaving them writhing in pain on the ground. The first mugger came at him with a knife, but my future husband was too quick for him. He dodged the knife and punched the mugger in the face, sending him tumbling to the ground. Then he turned and faced the other three, who were looking more and more nervous by the second, believe me. My future husband let out a low growl, which seemed to unsettle the muggers even further. Then, in a flash, he charged toward them, leaping through the air with incredible force. He tackled the closest mugger to the ground, punching him repeatedly in the face, until he stopped moving. The other two muggers backed away, looking for an escape route, but my husband wasn't about to let them go. He chased after them, catching them off guard and knocking them down with a couple of well-placed kicks. The way my future husband took down those four muggers that night, it was like watching a scene from a superhero movie. With all four muggers subdued, my husband turned to face me, a smile on his canine face. He was covered in blood and dirt, but he looked more alive than I've ever seen any creature. The thing that always amazes me most about my husband is the incredible strength and speed that he displays in werewolf form. He's like a force in nature, unstoppable and unbreakable, and yet he is also incredibly gentle and caring, especially when it comes to those he loves. That night, he showed me how brave and heroic he could be, and I fell in love with him before I even knew what he actually looked like. He may be a werewolf, but he's also a kind, compassionate, and selfless human being. I feel so fortunate to be married to him, and to witness the incredible things he's capable of every single day. Yes, so now I'm grateful, but back then, I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I'd just witnessed. But when the werewolf turned to face me, he morphed back in seconds, revealing his human form. Man, it was love at first sight. I mean, love at second sight, for the second time in a minute. He was tall, muscular, and ruggedly handsome in both forms, with piercing blue eyes and a crooked smile that made my knees go weak. We talked for a while, standing there in the middle of the street, surrounded by unconscious muggers, and I found myself drawn to him in a way I had never experienced before. Maybe that was because nobody ever saved my life before. He was brave, selfless, and confident, all qualities I never realized I admired. I had thought I wanted a feminist man who would accept my innate superiority, and yet somehow I found myself falling for this male chauvinist type personality who held doors open for me and paid for my dinner and all these corny old-fashioned things that I used to think represented the patriarchy. After that night, the werewolf cop and I started dating, and I fell in love with him more every day. As we got to know each other, he confided in me about his werewolf abilities and his work as a police officer. He told me which of his cop bosses knew about the werewolf and which thought it was just a rumor. Some of the police empowered him to do what he was doing, and they helped him keep his identity from the bosses who would have shut him down. I listened with an open mind and an open heart, fascinated by this aspect of him that I never knew existed outside of old scary movies or Batman comic books. 5 years later, we're still together, and I still feel the same way about him as I did that very first night we met. He's my hero, my rock, and my soulmate. And I feel grateful every single day that he walked, or rather leaped, into my life when he did. Sometimes when he's at work and I sit home alone, I make up lists of all the things I love about him. My 10 favorite things that he whispers to me. My 10 favorite things he says to cheer me up. Things like that. Here's my list of the 10 ways that my husband's lycanthropic or werewolf tendencies have made my life all the more interesting. Number 1, and this is number 1, our sex life is never dull. Let's just say that my husband's increased strength and stamina in werewolf form has led to some pretty intense moments in the bedroom. 2, our house is always secure. With my husband's enhanced senses in werewolf form, there's no way anyone could sneak into our house undetected. 3, we never miss a full moon. Instead of fearing the full moon, we celebrate it. It's the only time of the month when he has no choice but to change into the wolf, and watching my husband transform into his wolf form is a sight to behold. Number 4, I have a built-in protector. With my husband's heightened senses and physical abilities, I always feel safe when I'm with him. I guess this is a variation on number 2, but I'm leaving it on the list anyway. Number 5, my husband never gets sick. With his werewolf healing abilities, my husband never gets sick and recovers from injuries much more quickly than the average person. Number 6, our dog never gets lonely. Our dog loves being around my husband in either form, and having a werewolf for a master means he never lacks for exercise or attention. Number 7, we rarely need a flashlight. When we go camping or hiking, my husband's night vision comes in handy. Number 8, we never run out of firewood. My husband's werewolf strength means he can easily chop wood, which has come in handy during power outages. Number 9, our nieces and nephews have a fun uncle. They think it's pretty cool that their uncle can turn into a wolf. Number 10, we never need to hire a caterer. My husband's werewolf form has a ravenous appetite, which means he always loves cooking and eating large meals with our friends and family. He hunts also, so we always have so much venison that we have to give large parts of it away. All in all, being married to a werewolf police officer has been a wild ride. It has had its challenges, but obviously I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love my husband, both in his human and werewolf form, and I feel grateful to be married to such an interesting and unique guy. Before I met my husband, like I told you, I thought I disliked police officers. I thought they were all power-hungry and corrupt, and I often felt nervous around them. But then I met my husband, and my entire perspective changed. First of all, my man is the farthest thing from power-hungry. He joined the police force because he genuinely wants to make a difference in people's lives. He's one of the most compassionate and empathetic people I've ever met. Secondly, my husband's integrity is unmatched. He always does the right thing, even when it's not the easy or the popular choice. He's the type of person who always wants to uphold justice and always wants to do what's fair. Lastly, my husband's werewolf abilities have given him a unique perspective on the world. He's seen the darkest corners of humanity, both as a police officer and as a werewolf. His experiences have given him a deep sense of empathy and compassion toward those who are marginalized or facing their own struggles. All of these reasons coupled with the fact that I love my husband more than anything in the world, have completely changed my perspective on police officers. I have a newfound respect for them and the difficult, often thankless work that they do to keep us safe. So while I thought I disliked police officers before I met my husband, I now know that they can be some of the most selfless and compassionate people out there. Now, while I'm not saying that all cops or all werewolves are nice guys, I do have to say, ladies, that you should not turn a guy down for a date just because he's a cop or because he's a werewolf. And if you find a sweet guy who holds the door for you, that's both a cop and a werewolf, honey, then you do what I did. You marry his ass on the spot before someone else snaps him away from you. That's coming from me. And I thought I was too good for my werewolf cop husband.
Dogman is a mental or holographic projection, as told to Peter Bernard, read by P. Q. Ribber. I am one of the very few people who have gotten to see something I could call Dogman, not once, but twice. The first time, I was convinced I had a close encounter with a predator and that I barely escaped with my life. The second time, I became convinced that Dogman is, in actuality, a mental or holographic projection from a lost high culture. I retired in my late 30s and have pursued my dream since then, which is to hike and camp a full 40% of my time. I alternate between vacations in luxury campers to genuinely extremely dangerous climbs and hikes. I've also gone camera hunting for various rare animals, and I know how hard it can be to get a clear picture of a predator in the wild. I never got a picture of a dogman, but I did get two pretty strange stories. Okay, so I was hiking the Greenstone Ridge Trail in the Isle Royale National Park with 3 buddies, and we heard something bellowing off in the distance. None of us heard anything like that before in our lives. One of my buddies started pointing, and out of the bushes in front of us runs this giant thing. I want to say it was like a Yeti or a Bigfoot. It was a monster covered in dark brown hair. It didn't have big human feet, and it didn't have a gorilla face like a Sasquatch, though. It just sort of looked like a standing, talking dog from a kid's nightmare. It had hands, and it ran on its hind legs. It was making a growling sound, and it had something in its mouth. I couldn't see what it was, and maybe I'm lucky I didn't see it. It shook its head violently, as though trying to throttle the life out of whatever was in its massive jaws. It gave off every bit of the energy of a killer. This was a carnivore, born to kill and eat everything in its path. All of what I'm describing occurred in a split second, and I'm not sure the animal was even aware of our presence. It ran off up the path and off into the distance without ever acknowledging us. We stood there dumbfounded, unsure of what we had just witnessed. One of my friends noticed it left tracks as it ran off, and for some reason we decided to follow them out of curiosity. They led up the side of a mountain, following a path and walking directly down the center of this dirt path the entire way. Then the tracks ended. They just ended. The creature could have dived off the side of the cliff, but there was nothing below for hundreds of feet, and we didn't see its corpse down there either. There was no place to leap up to either. There was no place to go down from where the last tracks occurred. Also, the last tracks looked the same as the tracks before it. They showed the animal was running, uninterrupted, just as it had for its entire track. It did not look like the animal jumped from this point. It just looked like the animal had run into oblivion. I stated that the ground must just be harder from this point on, and that surely we'd pick up the trail as we headed further upward. My buddies didn't really buy my theory, as we were all still leaving tracks even as we traveled further up. We never saw the dogmen again that day. Fast forward to 3 years later. I'm on the same trail with 3 entirely different friends. I've told none of them about what happened the last time I was in this location. In fact, I haven't even told any of them that I was ever here before. Our first night camping, we set up tents in a clearing. The entire night we were tormented by someone running through our camp, slapping our tents and running off. It was a stunning concept to us that someone hiking up here would waste his energy like that, running around, risking getting shot, tormenting other hikers. Where was the logic in this behavior? Even though I had gone back to this area hoping to see the Dogman again, it hadn't dawned on me yet that our tormentors might now be human. All of our second day hiking, I had that feeling of being watched. I could see nothing with my eyes as I looked around to support the vibe I was picking up, but I was increasingly certain through the day that whoever was bothering us the night before was now following us. I told as much to my fellow hikers, who told me they did not share my feeling of being watched. That night, however, we were once again plagued by someone running through the camp and slapping our tents. When we would look outside, we would see nothing out of place whatsoever. We became too concerned with this to sleep, so we built a big campfire and spent the rest of the night staring off into the dark, straining to see what was out there. The third day, I once again had that feeling that we weren't alone. After a few hours, I insisted I knew where our stalker was. I pointed to a patch of woods west of us, and I darted directly toward it. This is a very bad procedure on a hike like this, to fly off without the agreement of the others, especially when you might be running directly toward danger. It was a completely illogical thing for me to have done. I think that whatever was in the woods had become a bit of a Moby Dick to me due to my recent sleep deprivation. So there I was, screaming in anger and running toward a monster like I was Mel Gibson in the movie Braveheart. My fellow hikers ran after me, probably unsure what else to do. Then, the thing that had been stalking us, the thing that had been taunting us, the thing that hadn't been letting us sleep, stepped out from the forest. This was the most terrifying thing that has ever existed. This was like a dog version of Tyrannosaurus Rex. This was a 13 or 14 foot tall, prehistoric looking giant with massive claws on the ends of both its thick arms and tree trunk legs. It whipped its tail behind it like a weapon, and it roared. My friends and I turned tail and ran like a scene from a Monty Python movie. There was nothing graceful about our egress. We climbed over each other and through each other like frightened children. The extremely and impossibly large dog thing had put our conscious thinking minds to sleep and had awakened the primal, terrified, pre-lizard fight or flight parts of each of us, and we had succumbed to the lowest aspects of our fear-based ego selves. We would have gnawed through each other to get to safety. There was no humanity left in any of us. That is how effectively the dog monster man was in reducing us to nothing but fear. A scream went up behind me, and when I say up, I mean one of my friends got lifted in the air as he screamed. I tumbled behind some bushes and a large rock hiding and peeking out. What I saw was something from an old black and white Warren horror comic book. This thing with a head like a giant rat, mixed with a giant dog, mixed with a dinosaur, held one of my buddies who had lost consciousness about 5 feet off the ground and inches from its nauseating, drooling, and giant jaws. It was going to eat my friend. I grabbed some rocks and started throwing them at the thing and screaming, anything to distract the dog monster from eating my friend. Then the other two joined me, and the strangest thing happened. something even stranger than this story has been so far. The animal blinked out. It turned off. It looked like someone just turned the TV set off. My unconscious friend slammed to the hard ground from 5 feet up where he had been being held. This woke him. We beat it out of there to the closest ranger station and cut the rest of our hike off. Fact: a variety of Dogman creatures are being reported by more and more people each year. Fact: these creatures can appear and disappear as though they are being projected from some other place. While here, they can leave physical traces like footprints. They can manipulate matter like when my friend got picked up. When they are turned off, it's as though they were never actually there. Fact: Dogman-type creatures have been reported by humans going back to before the dawn of civilization. Therefore, the technology which creates Dogman encounters must predate human civilization. Why was it created, and what exactly is it intended to guard? Is this technology still under conscious control, or has it been left to run in an automated way controlled by bots programmed before the dawn of human culture? What is the true nature and the true mission of the Dogman?
If you want a coloring book full of monster rusty light, then give this a look. It'll give you a fright, right? Scary stories, coloring book, werewolf coloring book. And just to make your mind explode, it's a digital download. All it costs is $2.09, and then you will be feeling fine. Coloring monsters today, hey, it's a coloring book, hooray. Okay, link is in the description.
Dogman by the Castle, as told to Peter Bernard. Back in the early 1970s, I had an aunt who dated an eccentric doctor. Visiting the castle on the beach that strange surgeon lived in almost cost me my life when I met the Dogman by the Castle. The 1970s, especially the early part, were unlike any period of time before or since. The counterculture of the 1960s became mainstream suburban culture in many ways by then. Shag rugs in sunken living rooms, straight normal guys growing their hair longer. 2 of the Yankees traded wives. And into this milieu, my aunt, let's call her Aunt Mallory, who had been very straight and proper, started dating this wild, swinging, and very rich surgeon. We didn't expect it to last long, but she and he actually became formal girlfriend and boyfriend, and our family got invited out to the castle to meet the guy. He reminded me of Vincent Price. He was African American, yet he still reminded me of Vincent Price. Maybe it was the smoking jacket and the cigarette holder for his French smokes. He also had a lion as a pet that he kept on a chain. Who would do that? This guy, that's who. I felt really bad for the cat, but I felt more scared of it than bad for it. It looked pretty cranky, as you can imagine. And so my sister and I got out of there as soon as we could and said we were going to wander on the beach. The doctor told us to stay out of the forest. There are wild beasties out there, he assured us. We rolled our eyes and of course made a beeline for the forest next to the beach. It was our obligation as kids to do so. We didn't realize until we were right up on them, but there was a sandy cliff about twice our height we'd need to climb in order to get up onto the level that the forest was on. We headed to the shortest point and started climbing. It was slow going and we both fell back a few times, as the hill was all sand and broke away at the touch. My sister noticed a rope someone had left hanging from the upper level, and we used that to climb up instead. We both attempted to make mental notes of where that rope was when we headed off into the trees aimlessly, looking for the proverbial adventure and whatever comes our way. We got that, and we got more. After racing around for a while and enjoying ourselves and the freedom from boring adults, we came upon something really strange. It was a footprint, but not like a normal footprint. For one thing, this guy had no shoes on. For the second, he seemed to have clawed toes. As my mind spun in circles trying to comprehend what we were looking at, my sister decided it had to be a bear or maybe a very large wolf. Suddenly I could see what she was saying. That made more sense than a barefoot man with claws. We followed the trail through the soft muddy dirt for some time, fascinated. The animal seemed to mainly walk on the balls of its feet, but occasionally would rest on its haunches and leave prints that looked a lot like a giant human print. The thing about that is that it would seem to indicate that it was squatting on its back legs but tilted up. Maybe it was walking bipedally too. That would mean it would have to be a bear unless it was a reincarnated prehistoric giant sloth like we had seen at the museum. This was turning into the best day ever. We followed the tracks until we reached a cave with an entrance large enough that we could walk through standing up. The footprints became jumbled at the cave entrance. Clearly this location was entered and exited a lot lately, and by more than one creature most likely. We found the home of the thing, whatever it was. Now why this next part made sense to us neither my sister nor I will ever know, but we decided it would be a brilliant idea to go in the cave, find a good place to hide and observe, and then discover whatever this creature was. That's right, we decided to go in the cave, where we knew strange creatures lived, and try to spy on them. Maybe we thought we could get on In Search Of with Mr. Spock or something. We had no sense at all that we might be entering into a dangerous situation in any way. We'd seen enough Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom episodes to be able to handle ourselves in the wild, we thought. So, we walked into the cave, as quiet as two dumb kids can, and the ground is hard in there. We don't see footprints anymore. It gets dark pretty quick. The smell is terrible, like a whole lot of things died in there. There's a passage where we had to scrunch down and crawl and go slow to get through. If it sounds like we were walking into a death trap, there's a good reason for that. The tunnel opened up into a larger alleyway with tall stones shooting up from the ground everywhere. We heard echoing noises, and following them led us to the edge of a chasm, a large stadium-sized amphitheater under the ground. And down there, here and there, darting about in the darkness, we could make out very large, very fast men. This was the first moment I felt fear. The scene reminded me of Planet of the Apes in some way, or maybe the first sequel. We were in a place that wasn't even supposed to be, with creatures that weren't supposed to exist. "What are they?" my sister whispered. "They're scary," I whispered back. We mutually decided to get out of there while we could, which as it turned out was a time that had already passed. When we got near the passage that we had to scrunch to get through, there were creatures coming out of them. We quickly hid behind the stalagmites growing up all around. One after another, these man-sized things crawled into the cave and left into the larger chamber. We wanted to get a good look at them, and now our wish was being granted. The trouble was, they were also blocking our escape and probably going to eat us for dinner. The things crawling through the holes were, in fact, dogs. They moved gracefully on all fours, then simply got up on their hind legs after exiting the tunnel and exited to the left in one graceful movement. They were equally comfortable on 2 legs or 4. I'm not really sure what was going on. Maybe they were returning from a hunt. If so, they didn't seem to be bringing any food back with them. Even so, they smelled like death and I wanted to vomit. It was a few minutes after they were gone before I got up the nerve to go look in the tunnel and see if the coast was clear. As I got within 10 feet of the hole, I could hear something coming out, and I just barely got behind a stalagmite in time. I was now standing behind a stone, literally 2 or 3 feet from the thing that emerged from the tunnel. I could hear that there was another one coming through now, and another and another. I was crying, but I was trying hard not to make any noise or even breathe out loud. 2 of the creatures got into some kind of argument behind me, and one slammed the other into the rock I was hiding behind. I just held on as pebbles and dust fell from the cave roof on me. I was worried there might be a cave-in when a brand new problem rose its ugly head. All the dust raining on me had made me feel like I had to sneeze. Have you ever suppressed a sneeze? It's not easy to do, is it? Have you ever tried to suppress a sneeze with two man-sized werewolf monsters having a fist fight directly behind you? That's even harder. But I did it anyway. I suppressed the sneeze. The creatures eventually took their troubles to the larger cavern, and I finally had a few seconds to go into a mild state of shock for a while. It seemed long overdue when the moment arrived, I assure you. I don't know how much time passed, but suddenly my sister was there to my left, dragging me by my arm and saying the coast was clear. I couldn't really follow what she was saying. I was not fully back to reality yet. As I was midway through the tunnel, crawling on my hands and knees, I woke up and realized where I was. That was bad timing. I was now frozen, unable to move, and weeping all over again. My sister was already out of the tunnel, and she looked back to see me crying. She urged me to get out. She told me we had to go. Nothing worked. I told her I couldn't move. Then, from behind me, I heard a roar. The next thing I remember, we were back at the rope at the edge of the forest, leaping off the edge and jumping the 7 or 8 feet back down to the beach before running back to the relative safety of the crazy mad doctor and the castle and his pet lion. Like a lot of people in that era, we had an adventure and we kept the details to ourselves. We never told our parents, we never told our friends, and after a while it seemed harder and harder to believe that it could have even happened. If there were really that many monster creatures with dog heads running all around, surely they wouldn't get reported in the newspaper. Surely there would be one in the zoo or a stuffed one in a museum. How could a whole bunch of carnivorous man-sized predators live so close to civilization and not be something that everyone was aware of? It's literally just not possible. And yet, this is the true story of the time I nearly got killed in Dogman Cave. Oh, he's a sweet talker, that Timothy Walker. There's no better than him, that Godzilla Tim. Please join me in thanking the great Godzilla Tim from Great Britain, who has donated to us once again. Another 20 pounds, on top of the 20 pounds he donated just the other day. This is a man among men. This is a man who is keeping us on the air almost single-handedly. If you like this show, please thank Godzilla Tim Walker, because he's one of the 3 or 4 people who have made sure that we stay on the air. And if you want to join Godzilla Tim in helping us stay alive, then listen to what this next little guy has to say. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.